like to introduce our guest speaker, Michael Smart. He joined the John Birch Society back in 1995, and a short time later became the chapter leader of his local JBS chapter. Through persistent activism, he turned a struggling chapter into an effective force in his community, and as a result, he was hired as the full-time field director in 1998. In the last 20 years, he has also been the regional director and development officer and has worked for the Society in 40 states. He's been married for 29 years and has 4 children. He's a native of California and has been called to Richmond, Virginia, home for the last 14 years. Michael.
What a pleasure to be here, even though things seem a little dark and gloomy in Virginia after what happened a couple of days ago. We've got to ask ourselves, how do we get into this mess? I got a little bit of insight I hope that you'll appreciate. She did mention that I'm a native Californian, but I've now lived out of California longer than I was ever there, and certainly consider Virginia my home. But I think that that has given me, and some of the other states I've worked in, a lot of insight as to what's going on in our world. And more importantly, I mean, we can sit around and complain about it, but what are we going to do about it? Virginia's blue, as they say. We want it to get dark blue, or do we want to, get a light blue and then back to where it's supposed to be? It's going to take some work. But in order to understand what has happened, or I should say in order to fix the problem, we've got to understand how it's happened. We've got to have a proper diagnosis before we start cutting on the patient. So I've kind of cut this talk down a little bit, and I'm going to probably have to cut it down a little bit more. But I hope to provide you some insight as to why things are the way they are, and then we'll address the situation or the solution. Millions of Americans are justly worried about a sketchy economy, a government that continues to expand its reach into every area of our lives, and a morally bankrupt culture. Many are asking themselves, how do we get into this situation? And more importantly, how do we get out of this situation? Well, this didn't develop overnight, and the fruit that we're now harvesting has been ripening for quite some time, in spite of our best efforts, it seems. But what is the real lasting solution to what ails our nation? Solution. In order to answer that question, we must first identify how we've managed to drift so far off course from the foundation upon which our republic was built. It was John Adams who observed that our Constitution was only meant for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And that is a very insightful observation in that culture determines politics, and a public who is largely unable to govern themselves will not care one whit for what our constitutional rule book says. And they will elect representatives who are just as ungovernable as they are. So really, the problem is the electorate. It's us. How did this happen? Well, culture, particularly in relation to our culture, which of course directly influences the type of government we have and deserve for that matter. There is a moral basis or foundation to a free society. Author William Norman Grigg has described the culture war as a deadly serious effort to destroy the institutions and traditions that have protected Americans from the horrors of the total state. A civilization without a common worldview and a common morality will not long survive. Diversity in these foundational areas is not strength. You would not build a house on a diverse foundation, or a chair with legs of various lengths. They would not be stable. They would be doomed to fail. Proverbs 22:6 wisely states that we should train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. We should always remember, and history tells us, that there are plenty of wicked people in the world who recognize the truth of that biblical statement as well. It cuts both ways. Tyrants of all stripes have always taken great pains to co-opt the minds and hearts of the young. Soviet Russia, Fascist Italy, and Nazi Germany are prime examples of tyrannical states that practice social engineering via the educational system. The Communist Manifesto, which was written in 1848, included free, state-controlled public education as a plank for a reason. If we're going to save all that we hold dear, you must know your enemy and how they operate. For centuries, the church and the common morality it ingrained in everyone, believer or not, was the center of influence in our communities. It is now being usurped and undermined by a statist enemy that denies and pushes a religion. In fact, it claims it's the embodiment of religious neutrality and publicly financed education. In reality, this system proselytes our youth into an atheistic, secular, humanist religion, really. We can now call our schools effectively they're pagan seminaries. They have a leadership system and a curriculum that mockingly catechizes our children to love themselves, and most of all, the state. The Christian worldview has been systematically eliminated from public education and hence public life. For the most part, we no longer acknowledge our ancestors' Christianity as a motivating factor in their lives and a superior worldview when compared to its rivals. You can say it's treated as if it's the worst thing that's ever happened to our country. They want you to hate your ancestors, essentially, now. You couple this with evolution, environmentalist indoctrination, sexual education, etc., and we shouldn't be surprised at the catastrophic results. It's divided our country. It's all magnified in college. Children are being trained up. And probably everybody in this room, to a degree, has been trained up. And that is why it is so difficult to get any traction as we try to turn things around. We're at a competitive disadvantage, essentially. Well, since the 1500s, the world has experienced a series of revolutions which always spawn more of the same. Bad ideas also have consequences. And if left unchecked, they become the next generation's presuppositions. I'm going to cut out a number of people that I wanted to talk about and just focus on a couple of people who were a big influence in getting this thing rolling. Author William Norman Lind has noted that in 1919, two Marxist theorists, Antonio Gramsci in Italy and George Lukács in Hungary, believed that Western culture and the Christian religion so blinded the working class in Western Europe to its true interests that communism was impossible until both could be destroyed. Gramsci was an Italian theoretician who believed that the old school communist tactic of overt violent revolution was obsolete and that it would be much wiser, albeit time-consuming, to revolutionize a country from within via what he envisioned as a transgenerational long march through the institutions. This has also been called patient gradualism. Father James Thornton has noted that not only did he advocate control of education, newspapers, magazines, the electronic media, literature, music, and the visual arts, he identified the Christian church with its 2,000-year-old dominant philosophical and moral system as the main target. He felt he merely had to water Christianity down to make it more compatible with Marxism. The Alinskyites, if you're familiar with Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals, experts at this. He really stomped on the gas pedal when it came to this stuff. If you've never read it, I highly recommend reading Rules for Radicals. To give you an idea about some of the tactics that he implemented starting in the late 1950s. Thornton also stated that serious opposition disappears since men are no longer capable of grasping the arguments of Marxism's opponents. Men will indeed love their servitude and not even realize that it is servitude. An even more important group, actually, that you need to understand, something that was called the Frankfurt School. Lind writes that George Lukács asked, "Who will save us from Western civilization?" and proclaimed a program of cultural terrorism that included introducing sex education in the Hungarian schools. He knew that if he could destroy a country's sexual morals, he would take a large step towards destroying its culture as a whole. Lukács had a profound influence on the Frankfurt School. It was established in 1923 by a group of radical revolutionary intellectuals. It was originally called the Institute for Marxism, but that sounded a bit controversial, so they changed the name to the Institute for Social Research. Because it was based at Frankfurt University in Germany, it quickly became known as the Frankfurt School. During the battle between international socialism and national socialism didn't look too promising at this point in Germany, so the radicals of the Frankfurt School fled to the United States when Hitler came to power, and eventually ended up on the faculties of Columbia, Princeton, Brandeis, and UC Berkeley. Their efforts led to the establishment of the various studies departments that infect our college campuses. Basically, the Frankfurt School believed that as long as an individual had the belief, or even the hope of belief, that his divine gift of reason could solve the problems facing society, then that society would never reach the state of hopelessness and alienation that they considered necessary to provoke socialist revolution. Their task, therefore, was as swiftly as possible to undermine Christian legacy. To do this, they called for the most negative, destructive criticism possible of every sphere of life which would be designed to destabilize society. That sounds familiar. That's where we're at. This is what they call critical theory. Carpet bomb everything with criticism and demoralize the targeted population. To further advance this agenda, the school recommended, among other things, these are going to all sound familiar to you, the creation of racism offenses, continual change to create confusion, the teaching of sex and homosexuality to children, the undermining of schools and teachers' authority, huge immigration to destroy identity, the promotion of excessive drinking, emptying of the churches, an unreliable legal system with bias against victims of crime, dependency on the state or state benefits, control and dumbing down of media, and breaking down the family. Is it any wonder that we're so easily manipulated due to the minimal actual education taking place in our public schools or the university system? It's basically become indoctrination. And that is why it is so difficult to get any sort of traction going, to repulse this seeming onslaught of socialism and all of this, just this craziness. But we can't not do anything. We got to be realistic about where we're at. And now we understand kind of what we're up against, why people are the way they are on the other side. So what do? You don't have control of the schools or the universities, and newsflash, you're never going to get it. So it falls upon us as individuals within our communities to be the counter-revolution, essentially. So we've got to get organized and approach this problem in a way that makes sense. And this is what the John Birch Society has provided for over 60 years. Many of the things that we're all freaking out about now, we've been talking about for over 60 years. Just like the Tea Party, we were mocked, called all sorts of nasty names. There's not anything I've not been called over the last 30 years. Absolutely. A lot of people would buy into it. I got to tell you right now, because of the way that the radical left has exercised their free speech, there's probably not a one of you in this room that hasn't been called something, either in person or on social media. Welcome to the party. The society was slandered, chased a lot of conservatives off. Some of them still won't listen to what we have to say. It's very sad. You've had the same treatment, so this should not be an obstacle for us to rub elbows, to link arms. So what does the John Birch Society do? Well, it's simple from a tactical standpoint, but it's very difficult. I'm not going to kid you, due to the social engineering that's going on. I imagine you find it difficult even within the Tea Party to get people motivated and to do anything. Well, we're dealing with human beings. People have lives. It's hard to make time, but I'm telling you, we've got to make time. It should be obvious. You've got to make time, and we've got to do things that make sense. We've got to prioritize what we do with our time. Well, the John Birch Society focuses on education. People have to understand their system of government and what the enemy is up to, what the enemy does. With a sense of urgency, you must make time to educate yourself, your family, and those you have some degree of influence over, and take a stand. You have to do it. It's got to be a part of your life. Look at this as sort of a launch of the reverse march through the institutions. At one point, the communists and the radicals were in the exact position, maybe worse so than we are. People didn't like them, for good reason, but they worked with a religious fervor and have managed to hijack our institutions. And we don't have time really to hijack the institutions as they did. We've got to reach out to our family and friends and help them understand what the proper role of government is. So the John Birch Society, we're a membership-based organization. We're organized into local chapters, much like the Tea Party. We have monthly meetings. The society, we're monolithic. We're not a democracy, and that's a bad word in my opinion. The society asks our members to set aside some time every month and focus on the same agenda that our members are focusing on all over the country. So our members get a monthly membership bulletin that lays out the things that we've decided, our priorities, things that we're working on. For example, our members right now, and it's a lonely battle at the moment and misunderstood in some areas, but we're working to try to stop the USMCA. It's not a good thing. Globalists love it. That's a huge red flag. And it's being sold as the solution to NAFTA, and it's not. It was negotiated by a guy named Robert Lighthizer, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And the president of the CFR, Richard Haas, did an end zone dance over it. He called it NAFTA plus TPP plus 10 to 20%. It's a bad deal. Economic union always precedes political union, and we need to withdraw from these sort of things. So our members have been working to educate their representatives about this and local opinion molders for several years. There's any number of other things that we're working on at any given time. Right now, because socialism is such a hot issue, we're trying to help people understand socialism and why that does not mesh with our system of government. It never has and it never will. So our members, they get a copy of our magazine a couple times a month. Sample copies in the back of this issue and another one. This one's all about socialism. So they would take that issue. It's very simple. They would buy extra copies of it to give to their friends, neighbors. Members leave it in doctor's offices, auto shops. They try to get it into the hands of what we would call opinion molders, local talk show hosts, people of influence in the community. It's very important that we reach out to them. Why? Because you can influence one or two people, they influence many, many more. The left does this, and they do it very well, if you haven't noticed. So typically our members would, at their chapter meeting, we're not there to talk about how bad things are. We already know. We're there to talk about what we're going to do about it in terms of building that informed electorate. So we would do something as simple, and there's sample sheets of this as well. We have what we call a 110-6 program. It's very easy for people to do. You pick 100 voting households, or however many you think you can handle, and 2 or 3 times a year you walk your neighborhood, knocking doors, giving them information. It could be 50 households and 30 businesses and 10 doctors, whatever you want to do with it. But you focus on those same people until they either tell you they appreciate the information or they tell you to get lost. then you fill their slot in. Out of those 100, we try to get you to pick 10 people that we consider to be opinion molders. Great way to think of an opinion molder, if you remember those old E.F. Hutton commercials, where there'd be a room full of people talking and this guy at a table in the corner, when he starts talking, everybody stops. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. We're looking at E.F. Huttons. So who could they be? It could be your congressman, legislators, mayors, city councilmen, businessmen, professionals, history teachers, religious leaders, editors, talk radio hosts. Give them material. You follow up with them. You make physical contact with them. And then out of those 100 people as well, we ask them to think about 6 people who are particularly good prospects we want to bring in as members. We always look for quality over quantity, because if you get quality, you're going to end up with quantity of quality. It's a very simple system, but it works. And we're not the biggest organization in the world, but we get a lot done. I won't draw parallels, but we kind of consider ourselves the elite of the patriot movement. We get a lot done with a little because our members really know their stuff, and they know how to articulate it well. And we do little workshops and things like that. A lot of our material out of the magazine, they make it available as a reprint, so you don't have to give somebody a whole magazine. You can give them just an article. There's a sample of this one on the back as well. When will we hold them to their oath? Upon taking office, all congressmen swear an oath that they will uphold the U.S. Constitution, but most have every intention of breaking that oath. And we give you some samples of their excuses and what a good reply to that would be. It could be as easy as handing out a pamphlet. Back to Basics is one of our standard pamphlets. It's great. We do a lot of literature booths at gun shows and patriotic events. I just did a nice booth up at the Values Voters Summit. We got a lot of material. We try to get their contact information to follow up with them, because we do educational series on the Constitution, or on socialism, or communism, or any other thing, globalism. I was just reminded this morning that we put out a video back in 2003 on fake news that I had forgotten about, and went back and rewatched it. Holy cow, that thing was incredible. Still very relevant. We used to show that as a film series, and we still do these things. I feel very pressed, and I apologize. I want to make sure I get it all in and honor the time commitment. So with that, I'll open the floor up to questions if anybody's got anything they'd like to add.
I have a question, kind of suggestion. Are you a Tidewater? What's your territory?
I cover North Carolina, Virginia, the swamp, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware.
Do you have a local group in Virginia Beach that?
Not currently. That's what we're trying to resurrect it. We had 2 active chapters here at one point, but
Well, the reason I'm asking the question, we and the Tea Party have the same exact identical agenda that you do. And we do this event called Engage Norfolk every year. And we go in the lion's den of the people who are of the opposite point of view. And I just want to let you know that when you go in there, they're hungry for the material, and when you actually talk to them, you can actually turn them around in their opinion. And when we first went in there and said Tea Party, they all looked at us like we lost our minds. But once you started engaging with the people one-on-one, it changed. So, you know, if you do...
I've never been in a den like that, but I know that you can flip people. Absolutely. Because they lack understanding.
We thought it was kind of nuts maybe to go there, but we've learned actually that was a positive thing, and we've reached a whole new base. So, you know, if you're looking for someone, if you have a local chapter and you want to work with us, we can give you some of those insights that we learned, because we're doing everything that you're doing. In fact, we're running Robert Dean for the school board, and we're trying to re-engage ourselves within the process to take back the institutions.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else?
Oh, how are you doing? Carrie Nunley has, in the peninsula, she'll often have JBS meetings. Anybody, y'all know Carrie Nunley?
Yeah, she's over in Newport News. And there's
The Pink
two
House.
active chapters on that side.
And I will vouch for John Birch Society. My mom used to drag me to John Birch Society meetings when I was 3. I remember being there with my mom's best friend, and they went, and there's even pictures of me sitting at JBS tables with all the material and stuff.
We like to have a good time, that's for sure. Any other questions?
Did I understand you right to say that USMCA is worse than NAFTA?
Could you explain the USMCA?
That's my plan.
Cue the plan.
It worked.
Tell us about it. Why is it a bad thing, you know?
Oh, well, again, it's just so simple. These political union, they get you tied up economically in these international courts. You surrender your sovereignty to these courts, and then they tug the strings. And I'll give you an interesting story. About 12 or 13 years ago, shortly after I moved here, I went with our Alexandria chapter leader, Dick Kite, to see his congressman, who at the time was Jim Moran. Awful guy, I mean, really. But we met with his legislative aide, and at the time we were talking about, remember, it was the Free Trade Area of the Americas, or the TPP, or something like that. And we gave him our spiel, and he said, let me stop you right here. We know that when we join up on these things, we surrender some of our sovereignty. But that's okay. Because if it turns out to be a bad deal, we just take it back. Right there. So Dick says, wisely, where do you get the authority to surrender sovereignty? You don't have that authority. Well, I disagree. It's that simple. And it's going, and most of them are like that. We did a really nice setup up in D.C. A number of years ago when the USMCA was first rearing its head. And we published a nice little book about foreign entanglements through these trade pacts. Sent it to every rep, every senator, then sent out an invite to come hear this presentation. And a handful of reps showed up. David Bratt, Tommy Massey, I forget the other guy's name, out of Western Maryland, Eastern Virginia, whose parents used to be members of the Birch Society. But they all showed up, and a couple other guys sent some legislative aides, but that was it. On the follow-up, not a whole lot of response. But they just told us that we had to work harder. It's tough. It's very tough. It can be very discouraging. It's going to get discouraging. But if we don't get busy replicating ourselves, helping our friends and neighbors and loved ones understand constitution limited government, nothing's going to change. It's going to get worse. And we got to get cracking. People do anything in direct proportion to their level of understanding. So if right now, if people are not willing to go out and show up, what does that tell us? It's not a good sign. We can't, I've already heard people saying, well, there's no way, no way Trump's going to get knocked out. It's just not possible. Well, I'm telling you, it's absolutely possible. It is. Hate is a motivating force. It really is. They really hate him. They really hate people like you. They'll show up. I'm not saying you got to hate them back in order to show up, but a little bit of righteous indignation doesn't help. But really, you got to think about it. You're doing this not just for yourselves, but for your posterity. Where's this mess going? You've got it. It's got to start with you. If you don't get it done, it's not going to get done. It's not going to get done by itself. But the bottom line, basic thing, we've got to replicate ourselves. We have to make more constitutionalists. Go ahead.
Speaking of posterity, do you have, we had about, I think it was 32 so 36% of Virginia even voted at all. Do you try to infiltrate, I hate to use the word, but infiltrate or get involved with the curriculum at the schools to see to it that in their civics classes and their government classes that they're actually teaching the Constitution and not concentrating, say, on social issues?
We do, to the degree that they will let you. For example, we know that there's Constitution Day that they're mandated to teach it, so we try to get because teachers like to take the easy way out sometimes. Sorry if there's any teachers in here, history teachers anyway. There's a good DVD out there about how the Constitution was put together, you know, the story of the Constitutional Convention and what have you. It's put out by PBS, so that always appeals to them. It's actually done quite well. We might try to get that in to a history teacher. For a while, we were getting our magazine in to college libraries, but that's been squashed now, although there are a few colleges that get it. But high schools, they're not going to accept anything like that. But if people know teachers, it's good to try to reach out to them. It's, you know, sort of
To
work.
follow up on that, you have No Child Left Behind, and then some of the country has Common Core. So I've scored both, and what they do is in the critical and analysis part of learning, they don't let them do that. They tell them what to think. So those are some areas that I just wonder why people just leave that alone, because it's horrendous. And the teachers teach to it, because if they fail those scores, they lose money.
And then they're trained to do that in teacher schools.
I just wanted to share a small story with you about the whole thing. I had to pick my daughter up from middle school one time early. And I went in there and they told me where her classroom was to go get her. And as I walked around the hallways, there were all of these posters on the wall, and each one of them had part of the Constitution on it. And they were teaching the Constitution. But every single poster that talked about a part of the Constitution began with, government gives you the right to, and then talked about your constitutional rights. So even though I had to be somewhere, I went back and I waited and I went to talk to the principal, very nice guy, and I went in and I asked him, why are you doing this when those are inalienable rights that come from God and your Creator? And he said, oh, well, we don't teach that in middle school because it's too complicated. We cover that later in high school. And so to your point, these kids think they're learning the Constitution, but the very premise is there's no inalienable rights and you have no sovereignty.
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly right. And that's an improvement on that. When I lived in Tacoma, went to get my daughter from school. It was during Christmas time. Walk into the school and there's a winter tree there, decorated with United Nations globes, little UN blue globes. You know, there's like a whole UN love fest going on there with this like third graders. You know. So, but I mean, we should have the lowest expectations. That way, we're never disappointed on those sort of things. But the real solution lies in us. We have to take it upon ourselves. Obviously, many of you, if not all of you, are already doing that to a degree. But you got to get other people to do it. You know, we've got to reach out. And something that I always point out, and something that we got to work on, you got to get young people. I've spoken to a number of organizations over the last couple of years, and every civic organization has the same problem. It's all older people. This is actually kind of a younger crowd
Really?
right now than what I see sometimes. Yeah, I know. I'm not kidding you. They're all having problems. People socialize differently now, if they socialize at all. When the society was started, people talked to their neighbors. Most of our meetings were held in somebody's home or homes. We would have a chapter, 2-3 neighborhoods right next to each other. People socialize differently now. We've got to somehow get back to just like this. I mean, this is great. This is actually pretty decent turnout. But you got to double this. You know, in 2020, we got to double this sort of a thing. And when the time comes to vote, I mean, you know, we're not partisan. We don't tell people how to vote because you know, people that we run with, it's so obvious. We don't have to tell them who to vote for. But you gotta throw somebody in the car with you and take them with you. It's like you gotta throw somebody in the car with you and bring them to the meeting. We gotta do these things. We gotta make time to do these things. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, we seem to have a younger generation that is worried about how they're gonna pay for their college, and they want a minimum wage higher, and, they seem to want everything, that, like the government is the answer to everything. How do you conquer that? How do you educate on that, It's like Medicaid for all, Social Security for all, $1,000 a month, and it's like they think the government has all this money and they forget to realize it's coming from us.
Yeah. Well, I honestly don't have an answer to that. That doesn't require just, you've got to work hard. If you're going to go out and try to turn those people, I'm going to be honest, I think your time would be better spent working on conservatives that are more indifferent and motivating them or deepening their understanding to get them to actually show up and do something. There are plenty of nominal conservatives. They need your immediate attention. Those are the people that you've got to reach out to. I myself was one, a former inmate of the California public school system. I came out of there, I had a pulse, but it wasn't a very strong one. And kind of jumped on the Republican train, but I was not, in terms of understanding, it was the depth of a puddle, really. And a little old lady heard me talking in the hallway at church. There was an election coming up, and I told this guy, we live in a democracy. Those who show up win. You got to come out and just punch the straight ticket, man. Don't mess around. And the little old lady, Jane Braithwaite, she turned around, come up, stood next to me. She said, Mike, it is so good to hear a young person talking about what's going on in your country, blah, blah, blah. She said, let me ask you something. If you said something and it was wrong, you'd want to know, wouldn't you? What did I say? I knew it. You couldn't be mad at little Jane. She's got tall, blue hair, all teased up. She said, I knew that'd be the case. I'm going to bring you some information I know you'll find interesting. She turns around and walks off before I can even get a comment out. I thought, what on earth? And, being young, I forgot about it, within 10 minutes. Well, she didn't, because that afternoon, she knocks on my door. She's got a copy of the Constitution, one of those little pocket ones, and the Federalist Papers. She says, make some small talk. She says, I could not help. I wasn't eavesdropping. I could not help but hear you say that we live in a democracy. Did you know you can't find that word in the Declaration of the Constitution? And so I did. I said, waiting for the punchline, or what's she doing? She said, well, I thought you might want to read the Constitution. You've read the Constitution, haven't you? I said, well, if I have, I'll be honest, it's been a long time. She said, I thought that'd be the case. I'll give you a copy of the Constitution if you'll read it. Who's going to say no to Jane Braithwaite? So I said, sure, I'll read it. In fact, I'll read it tonight. I like to lay in bed and read. I really annoys the spouse. It's a big stack of books. So I did. And well, she had loaned me her copy of the Federalist Papers, and she had put a Post-it note on every page where it talked about democracy. None of it's good. It's mob rule. It's this, that. What on earth? And she shrewdly loaned it to me because she got to come back and pick up her book and have a conversation. And Jane, where did I get the idea that we live in a democracy? She said, well, of course everybody thinks that. Even Rush Limbaugh says he's the doctor of democracy. She said, but it's not true. And of course you got that in school, I'm sure. And then we made some more small talk. Crucial point. She did not overwhelm me with information. She didn't try to tell me what Adam Weishaupt ate for breakfast when he started the Illuminati, or what George Soros was up to. All those things may be true and interesting, no doubt. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing was to kind of set the hook, And so the next thing she said, imagine if you were wrong on something that basic, could you be wrong about other things? Whoa, you know, I was like,
To the republic for which it's named.
absolutely.
So now they would say,
Yeah.
what is in school?
Yes. And of course, I had no idea. I thought I was, of course, being in my early 20s, I was a total genius. I listened to Rush Limbaugh on my commute, and I knew everything I needed to know. Looking back now, I don't even know if I should have been voting, you know. It was, kind of depressing to think about, but not uncommon, even with conservatives or people that think they're conservatives. And it's not, again, and that's why I say it might be easier to go after people in terms of education that are already kind of nominally conservative, or you would think they would be. You may have fellow parishioners, or church members, or what have you that you could, that you know about, or people in the, guy you play with. People play racquetball anymore. I don't know, a guy you play racquetball with. But give them something to read. Talk to them, but don't come across as the the crazy guy or so intense that he thinks you're going to do an MMA move on him or something like that. But it can be done. But you got to be proactive at it.
May I mention another mistaken word is the Democratic Party. There is nothing democratic about the Democrat Party. And even our president will tell you that. And listen to him, he never calls it the Democratic Party. Yes, the other day everybody's handing out their, here's the Democratic ticket. It's not democratic. And don't thank people who vote.
Somebody else had a question.
Would you by chance follow up with the anti-federalist papers?
Well, you know what? Anti-federalist papers are quite an interesting read, given our current state of affairs. There were some of the founding fathers, we would call them founding fathers, Patrick Henry, George Mason, that thought, what on earth just happened up there at that convention? It was Patrick Henry, I think, that said, I smell me a rat. You read through it now, and I've not read through it long. It's been so long that I couldn't drop any good quotes on you or anything. But they made some really good points about what could possibly happen when you put your system of government into the hands of the federal government and the people. We're dealing with people. We always have to remember that. It's worth a read. If anybody was interested, I actually have some copies of it in my car, if you want to buy one. It's worth having on your shelf at least and using it as a resource. That's an excellent question. I wish I was more prepared to go into that. One more.
Yeah, Mike, getting back to that JBS chapter, you mentioned to me some months ago that there was a number of people in Virginia Beach, that would like to be in this Virginia Beach chapter, but you were just still looking for a chapter leader.
We're a volunteer-based organization, and so you have a volunteer leader, chapter leader, and we've got a lot of Indians, but no chief. So, and the one guy that we have that could be a chief, the older guy, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, sort of a thing. So if anybody's interested in being a chapter leader at John Birch Society, definitely talk to me.
Mike, what does the chapter leader have to do or be able to do?
Well, they run the meetings. They keep them on track. We try to make them an hour and a half long. We stick to the bulletin. There's a whole thing to do. Stay in contact with your members, collecting information on letter writing and outreach, things like that. That's something we can get into at another time. So with that, I think I'm probably way over quick.
So does anybody else have any announcements to make?
Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to 11, we'll be attending the Vision to Action Coalition Committee meeting in Town Center.
That's tomorrow?
That's tomorrow.
Friday?
So what this commission was, we had it Envision Virginia Beach 2040, and that plan was supposed to be scrapped, but the city government, through the city manager, set up a STIR office and a communication office with Julie Hill, and they've been here as speakers before. So they've decided to take this lobbyist group, a light rail, urbanization, government runs everything group, and the city is making them the official voice for the comprehensive plan, which is the strategic plan for the city for the next 6 years. So I've been asking, and we've been talking about trying to get the city to abolish the group since there's no more Vision 2040, but they're not. So I'm going tomorrow morning, and I've been attending the meetings and following the information. I'll keep you informed, but the bottom line, as this gentleman was talking about, is these institutions get created and they're fully staffed by agents of change that are not looking out for our best interest. And so what we need to do is A, participate, and B, communicate. That's all. Yes,
Robert, I got a quick question on that.
Reed.
Reed, how's that playing into the possibility of regionalism?
It's
That sounds like something that would
it's-
springboard right into regionalism.
Its number one goal is regionalism, which usurps the sovereignty of each local city and uses appointed government in place of elected government. Anyway, I don't want to take up more time. I just want to let you know that we are attending these meetings and we're following up because the comprehensive plan dictates all of our taxes and where all our money is going to go, and it's very important.
Yeah, it was my understanding they were gonna like rework that plan. Make, you know, like
Yeah.
scrap that one, which was all based on light rail, and do a new one.
All based on light rail.
It was based on light rail.
They're gonna
and,
do a new
strategic
one
growth
based on
areas,
light
yes.
The 2020 thing was a joke, I read
It was
it.
the 2040
We're gonna
plan.
do a new
The
one.
2040 plan was a joke.
Yeah.
It's a bad joke.
Be sure to wear your shirt.
Okay, if there are no other, you know, reports or announcements or anything.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're adjourned.
Uh,
Hey, Dane? What's up, man? You ready?